Now we have DevOps as a movement, as a way of thinking that essentially says, hey, you cannot do word-based operations anymore. That's basically what it is. We knew that before, everybody was saying that long before that, but now we have that movement, and that is shaking the certain profiles within company.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 99. Do DevOps engineers need to know how to code? Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darren and Victor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darren reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Victor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darren Pope and Victor Farsick. I was recently on Reddit and saw the question, do DevOps engineers need to know how to code? And I thought to myself, yes, they do.
It's a question with such an obvious answer, isn't it? It's the whole point. DevOps. We write code that is reflected as our operational tasks. We develop operations.
What would be the opposite of that? If you're not writing code, are you writing Google documents? Word documents?
Word documents. Maybe, it's 21st century. README files. No more Word documents.
Well, if it was a README file, that would infer that you're actually putting it into Git, which would already be sending you down the code route. I'm just saying that if you're not writing code, then what are you writing?
If you asked me that question like 20 years ago, I would tell you, yes, there is unhealthy high percentage of sysadmin operations who do not write any code, are hardly even writing shell scripts, only when there is no other way to do it. But today, I guess, if you would qualify writing HCL files in Terraform and YAML files and stuff, if you would qualify that as code, I sincerely hope that absolutely everything is writing something that is interpretable by machines and stored in Git. The bigger question is whether that's enough, whether you can just be a user of some tools that enforce everything as code, which is basically almost all the tools right now, or you need to go beyond that and potentially create your own tools, extend existing tools, and things like that. I think that's a real question. Now, I'm pretty sure that there is somebody over there that goes to AWS and clicks buttons, but I hope, I'm not even going to say we are, but I hope that most of us are using something as code type of tools.
It's interesting that you brought up HCL, talking about Terraform. If you're doing Terraform correctly, you're just defining things and not doing the hacks that we've talked about in the past, to where you're trying to loop over things.
Yes, but those hacks are often, sometimes unavoidable even.
Correct. But if you're going down the hack route and you're having to, quote unquote, write code, then Terraform may not be the right tool. That might be where Pulumi might be a better fit, since you're not able to use Terraform the quote unquote correct way.
Yeah, but I could play devil's advocate and say that you cannot use Pulumi the correct way either, because there is a declarative part of what we are doing, especially with infrastructure. There is always something declarative, and there is often some code as well, in terms of not machine interpretable, because in that sense, YAML is a code, but some conditionals and loops and what's not. So you could say the same thing for Pulumi as well. Actually, if I go to Pulumi website and I look at their examples, I would say, hey, actually, most of your examples are something that is well suited as YAML, but you put it in Python, and then there is this tiny piece over there. There is that small if statement or while loop that justifies it. Now, I'm not trashing Pulumi. I think Pulumi is great, but it's only code in terms of programming. No, it's not.
Yes, Joe, please come back with us again someday. If somebody was to become a quote unquote, I'm using quote unquote a lot today, DevOps engineer, what the heck is that, number one? But assuming that we know what it is, where should they start writing code? Is it bash scripts or a scripting language of some sort?
Yeah, if you're just starting, I think that the best thing to do is to turn around and see what are others doing in your company, assuming that not everybody in a company is starting, which happens, and then that's a really complicated situation. Then you should run away. If others are using Python, use Python. If others are using shell script, use shell script. That's all okay. You need to start somewhere. I don't have a strong preference what should be the first language somebody starts with. The more important thing is that for you to start. Now, if you're talking about infrastructure, maybe not Java, maybe not heavy languages like that, but just start. Python, shell, anything, go.
Your point that you made, though, is critical. Pick what other people are already using within the organization.
Generally speaking, what you want, what I hope that you want, is to be in a company where you're not left on your own. You want others to lift you up. You want others in a company, wherever you're working, your team, to take you to the next level, whatever the next level is in your career. That really depends from one person to another. And not leveraging your teammates for your own improvements would be silly.
The other side of that is you don't want to put your teammates at a disadvantage because you've gone off and done your own thing.
That as well. Because, hey, if everybody's using Python and now you are clever and you're going to write Go, and nobody else wants to write Go, then you might have a problem. That is completely unrelated whether Python or Go or Shell or whatever you want is better appropriate for a task. It is a team effort after all, and others might need to work on top of your work, and you will work on top of other people's work. It needs to be some kind of consensus about things, assuming that that's possible.
It's always possible. The question is it probable?
There are also cases when you go against everybody because you believe in something. You know that's the right thing to do, and then by doing that, eventually others might see the benefits of that and come to your side as well. It's not as easy as it's always a team effort. Very often improvements are also made by going against the current. But it's rather, if that is happening, if I had to spend 3 months on my own, ignoring everybody else to get to the point where I can show the benefits of that something, that's a smell of something being terribly wrong in that organization. But if you go back to the question, I think that the question was wrong. It's a question with an obvious answer. Yeah, should DevOps people or people being involved in Dev and Ops code? Of course. The answer is, of course, yes. The real question is, should every single engineer in every company working with software write code? I think it's a much more global question. And now we have the term DevOps just to enforce the answer to that question to operations. But I could say the same thing for testers. I could say the same thing for almost any other type of engineer. Should you write code? Hell yeah.
Wow, that's an emphatic.
You just said the word I don't know.
Strongly worded. Emphatic, strongly worded. So you're saying testers need to be able to write code?
Absolutely everybody working in software industry needs to write code, or in some cases to at least understand code. I'm putting that exception over there to understand because, okay, if you're a product owner and that's your full-time, 100% job, maybe you don't have to write code, but at least you need to understand so that you understand what you're owning. Excluding management, yes, everybody writes code. You cannot have a company where increase in business requires equal increase in manpower. We probably agree with that because if you're a $1 million company, you probably have 2 million in expenses. You're basically losing money. Your goal is to increase business and decrease the costs over time so that you become profitable. That's how more or less everybody is going through or wants to do. If you need one person to test 50 features that your applications have, when that application has 100 features, you will need 2 people. You will be always increasing the number of people exponentially, or you will need to start skipping things. Hey, we cannot do full regression. How many times did you hear we cannot do full regression anymore because we are too big?
More than I can count.
Exactly. And that's because you grew beyond what you can do with people, with humans. You're probably in a situation that you grew, but you did not start writing tests when there was time, and now it's so big that nobody can write tests as code anymore. And then you cannot do regression. You cannot test your system. You need to test specific features because your capacity is not increasing as fast, human capacity as business, which is normal, which is how it should be.
What should happen in an organization that refuses to do that? They believe that they can scale linearly with a human.
That company is bound to disappear unless it has some sort of monopoly so that they have guaranteed market share. If we exclude those cases, no matter what I do, I will always have business, that company will disappear. It will become equivalent of, of Kodak.
The problem is the monopolies, though. Because if they are the only option, they're not going to go anywhere, and they're going to continue doing what they've been doing, except doing it worse.
But only for a while longer than they would normally do, because even monopolies get threatened and broken sooner or later. Right now in Spain, I don't know how it's in US, there is a monopoly on internet that you need to have certain things that you don't need in order to get internet in your home. There is a certain level of monopoly, even though there are multiple companies. What happens if Starlink becomes a thing for real? That I don't need actually that wire that is provided by one company, no matter which company I use as my provider. Starlink, and I'm now talking about Tesla Starlink, Elon Musk thing, only as example because others are coming, they will break that monopoly. So sooner or later, monopolies get broken. And then there is absolutely nothing that those companies can do to survive unless they convince governments to do some nasty things that will keep them alive. You can say the same thing with banks. Fintech sooner or later will shake. Actually, it is already shaking the monopolies of banks.
Banks, hedge funds, one word, cryptocurrency.
Now, some attempts like that fail, some are successful, but sooner or later, no monopoly survives forever.
As people are moving into their positions, and this question came from someone that appears to be probably newer, if they believe that they should not have to learn how to code, should they just move on?
They should go somewhere else, move on somewhere else. I mean, I don't know, I want to be in Formula One team. Doesn't matter what's my role going to be there, and I don't know how to drive. I mean, is there such a person?
I'm sure there is.
Okay, I stand corrected. But simply everything is code. Now we have DevOps as a movement, as a way of thinking that essentially says, hey, you cannot do word-based operations anymore. That's basically what it is. We knew that before, everybody was saying that long before that, but now we have that movement and that is shaking the certain profiles within company. Same thing was happening with tests. Unfortunately, I don't think it was really successful, always, but it will come again. It's like a tree. Every time you shake a tree, few apples fall down, and sooner or later you will be out of job if you don't code.
It's interesting that you brought up word-based operations. Can you believe we actually even did that back in the 90s? The 2000s?
Not that I can believe. I suffered through it.
Well, I did too. I contributed to that suffering, I believe. Even when it was, okay, this will be hard, but man, it'll be much easier if we just had a script to run. And people made decisions not to even write a script because they said, oh no, a human can check the boxes off on this Word document. Oh wait, which version do they have? Well, I have this version, but this wasn't the real version because actually we had copies of the Word document.
Even readmes in Git are already improvement on that.
But that was assuming that you actually had some sort of version control.
Did you have those cases where you would copy and paste from Word document only to realize that Word changes certain characters, like, for example, double quotes. You know?
Yeah. It added in extra words. And that's the reason why I had a client at one time. It's like, oh, yeah, we do everything in Word. I said, not any longer. You don't. We're going to be using plain text for no other reason than that. I was like, yeah, but we can't format it. I went, exactly. Okay, we've diverged away from here of knowing how to code. I guess a Word document, because of the formatting, is coding, which is sad.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, my definition is if machines can interpret it, yes. I'm yet to see somebody uploading Word document to S3 and then that being converted into, I don't know, Kubernetes pods or whatever.
So as people start to learn code, if they're new into an organization, talk with the people in your organization and find out what it is they're using. If you're on the infrastructure side, are they using Terraform? Are they using CloudFormation? Are they using Pulumi? Are they using fill in the blank? Start with that. Then, if you want to experiment with the not what people are using, go for it. Then if you want to start going further down that route, start learning a language. Python is probably one of the ones to start with. My only problem with Python is getting the runtime right. That's where running it via Docker makes it much easier, because trying to maintain Python on disk in these times is a pain, especially if you're still running Python 2. By the way, Python 2 has been end-of-lifed, in case you didn't know.
I didn't, but I'm happy for it. It's still pre-installed everywhere. My Mac came with Python 2.
Yeah, I know. But it's because that's what was still live when they baked that version of the OS. Okay. Do DevOps engineers need to know how to code? The answer is...
There is no such thing DevOps engineers, but if there would be DevOps engineers, they would need to know how to code.
And therefore, there is the paradox. We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.